Hi, my name is Todd McAlary. I'm the instructor for APS150, Introductory Ethics for Engineers at the University of Toronto, and this is Module 3B regarding the environment. Preserving the environment is an important task for engineers. Before the Industrial Revolution, humankind really didn't have much of an effect on our environment. But we've grown in numbers, and we've also generated a lot more ways of affecting our environment. And so now it's something that is increasingly important for us to preserve. The environment can be affected in a number of different ways. Temperature, for example, global warming, air pollution, soil and groundwater pollution. But there are other aspects like odor, noise, foreign species that can have an adverse effect as well. And that can be at either a small or a large scale. It can be rapid or slow. Small scale impacts might affect just a single individual. For example, sound levels in a room where a person is working could result in their loss of hearing if they don't have adequate hearing protection. And protecting workers from the hazards associated with their work environment is an important part of an engineer's responsibility. It can include also protection against temperature or radiation, chemicals, biohazards, a variety of different factors. Large-scale impacts might include things like acid rain, radiation from the Chernobyl nuclear reactor spread around most of the Earth at the time the reactor melted down. Oil releases that can contaminate large sections of coastline and aquatic ecosystems. Ozone depletion basically affects the whole planet. There's depletion of non-renewable resources, deforestation, and unsustainable practices such as farming and logging. But engineers have solutions to all of these, and they fall into four broad categories: either prevention, containment, restoration, or alternative processes. So prevention might include things like educating people on how to handle chemicals and how to dispose of them properly so as not to create problems, and the associated training that goes along with that, putting systems in place to make sure that adverse effects don't happen or accidents don't happen, and monitoring to evaluate whether or not there are problems. Containment, when there is a problem, is usually something that's implemented as quickly as possible to try to minimize the extent of the problem. And once a problem is contained, then efforts are usually made for restoration to the degree possible. In some cases, the cost of restoration may be more than is justified, and there may be adequate to just contain the contamination within a limited area. And alternative processes include things like electric cars. We don't create vehicle emissions right from the beginning. But even with those, there can be some decisions to be made. For example, the batteries that are in electric cars contain chemicals that are toxic, and if they're not properly disposed of, they can create problems of their own. So we might be swapping one problem for another if we're not careful. So the environment generates a number of debates, a number of ethical dilemmas, a number of societal debates. For example, when a company is manufacturing something, they could make a decision to manufacture in one country or another, and certainly things like labor costs will factor into that decision, but there might also be decisions regarding the costs of protecting the environment or protecting the workers. And if they have the option of manufacturing an area with less stringent standards for protecting workers or the environment, that might reduce their production costs, and that might be good for their business, but is it ethical? Here's some statistics, for example, of annual fatalities compared to the size of the population of workers. And you can see that in some countries, the percentage of workers that are killed on a per capita basis is higher than in others. And that relates pretty closely to the level of standards and care implemented by engineers for the protection of workers in the workplace environment. So think about what some ethical alternatives might be. Maintaining that same level of standard of care for a global company in all of the companies they practice in, even if it goes over and above the minimum legal requirements. So another societal debate: is it ethical to sustain our carbon footprint? At the present time, humankind is using more non-renewable resources than we can sustain moving forward. And we will have to reduce our carbon footprint. Right now, the carbon footprint is not uniformly distributed on a per capita basis. This map shows that there are certain countries that are using more than their share. There are other countries that want the same sort of lifestyle that can be afforded by having the luxury of your own personal automobile or the things that, you know, are bad for the carbon footprint. So while they're struggling to achieve the lifestyle, we're struggling to change the lifestyle to try to make it less demanding on the planet. Agriculture is a big challenge. Agricultural practices date back thousands and thousands of years, but they've evolved considerably in order to maximize the yield of crops from a diminishing supply of arable land. And, you know, is it ethical to use genetically modified crops in order to maximize the yield? You know, what kind of practices are ethical for sustaining arable land? You know, can we use up non-renewable water supplies just in the short term to keep the crops going? And, you know, basically what alternatives do we have? Here are two maps that show the distribution of drought in the world and the distribution of population in the world. And you can see that some of the most populated areas are also areas that are subject to some of the most severe droughts. And that's going to have a significant impact on the food supply for those areas where the food is most necessary. That's going to be an issue that's going to get worse before it gets better. And part of the reason for that is the change in the global population. In around 1960, when I was born, the population of the world was only 3 billion people, and it's already about 7 billion, so it's doubled just during my lifetime and more. And in the next 30 or 40 years, basically the work span of the students who are watching this video, the population of the Earth is going to increase by another 3 billion people. And it'll reach the point where the planet is no longer able to sustain a food supply that's adequate for all of us. And at that point, there's going to be some very difficult decisions to be made as to how do we feed ourselves? Do we come up with, you know, food that we can manufacture, or do we still need to grow food? So think about this. If you graduate in 2017 and work until 2060, you know, what can you do as an engineer that will improve the health, safety, and environment for your coworkers, your friends, and your family? And think about also what you can do even starting today. And that's the end of Module 3B. Thank you.